So good afternoon. What I've been asked to do today is to share with you what's the role of marketing, advertising and technology in 100 years' time. I believe context is really important. And to give you some context, the reason I can talk to you about this today is I get to work with some of the biggest brands around the world, helping them try to figure out what they should do with their marketing and advertising tomorrow, let alone in 100 years' time. So is advertising and marketing going to be more like the past, or is it going to be more about telling us about the future? That's the questions I'm going to solve today. So to do that, I'm going to go back in time. You heard me right, I'm going to go back in time, not forward in time. As a child growing up, I didn't really believe in history. I believed in all the technology wonders that you all have now today. I didn't really care much for history, but as I've got older, I've appreciated history much more deeply about what it can tell us about people, their values and their behaviors, and how it's going to change. So first of all, I'm going to go back in time. So instead of looking at 2112, I'm actually going to go back, not to 2012, but even further back than that. So I've used my Facebook timeline as a way to do that. So this is my Facebook timeline today, showing you some of the things I've been doing and activities and where I've been. So let's go back a few years. Oh, okay, maybe not far back enough. That's me clearly doing some drinking and partying and at some concerts. Let's keep going back a little bit further. Okay, that's me doing some presentations and checking in around the world. Let's keep going back. All right, so 1912. So we're going to go back to my grandfather's birth when he was born back in 1912. Okay, so I'm going to show you what Facebook would have looked like in 1912 with some photographs that my mother managed to dig up from the archives and we managed to scan in. So here's some black and white photograph. That's actually my grandfather in the bottom there when he was born outside their log cabin outside of Melbourne, Australia. In the top you'll see that's the bullock trains they actually used to be transported around. That was their transportation at the time. So what did advertising look like back then? Well, here's an old advertisement, believe it or not, my mother had actually kept. It's for a soda company. It's from Tamworth in New South Wales. And you'll actually notice they actually have in their ad our slogan. They actually state what their slogan is. So even back then, when people didn't know how brands were trying to help personify a company, they were actually telling you what their slogans were. All right, a few other ads back from those early 1900 days. This is what Coca-Cola advertising looked like back in the day. Clearly saying that it was about thirsty and weary people and they could have a great drink of Coca-Cola to be refreshed. Here's some more. Satisfies the thirsty, helps the weary. They were very much stating what their product was all about, but they were also trying to get you to try the product. And so advertising at the time really wasn't about dreaming about new technologies or the future. It wasn't even about thinking about it or talking about it. It was actually about trying. It was giving you a reason for why you wanted to try one of these products. Okay, let's move forward. We're going to jump forward like 40 years. 1952. Let's have a quick look at advertising back then. Here's one of Motorola's first advertisements for television. Okay, again, I love how the line up here is how television benefits your children, right? Nothing helps more with advertising than going for the heart or the head, right? And so here they were trying to tap into those parents about why you need a television, why it won't be a great babysitter, why it'll actually help you with your children and their benefits. Okay, here's an example from looking at Panasonic for their new boombox. Now we all carry around little MP3 players, but that's once upon a time what they look like. And so here they were still getting you to think about new ways to try technologies. Let's jump forward in 1982. I've been born now, I'm a young child, and let's see what it looks like back then. Oh, who's that handsome devil? That's actually me. Get another old photograph dug up. I'm sharing everything here. It's not Bill Gates, it's actually me. That's me when I was about 8 years old, and that was actually with my first computer. So I believe I'm a digital native. I grew up with these computers. I learned very much that you could do anything with them and you really couldn't break them, which is very different than my father, who still believes he can break the computer if he does something wrong. And so this was the advertisements of the time. That was actually a VIC-20 or a Commodore 64. These were the ads that probably convinced me to go and bug my parents to go and buy a computer. And so hopefully it was this kind of advertising and not that kind of advertising that made me go and buy that. I hope I wasn't aspiring to the guy with the open shirt and sitting around the pool with the portable computer. But anyway, so let's keep jumping forward. 1992. What does advertising look like then? Well, 1992 was really about how new technologies were taking us into the future. It was a time of great prosperity. We had the 90s. We had, people being very ostentatious with their incomes and their disposable purchases. So let's have a look at what advertising looked like then.
Have you ever borrowed a book thousands of miles away, across the country,
Gesture ahead, take next exit.
without stopping for directions,
Route 101.
or sent someone a fax. From the beach, you will. And the company that'll bring it to you, AT&T.
How cool, right? That's 1992. That's not from now. That's 1992. Email is not widespread. We don't have access to the internet on our phones. And so you've got navigation in your car. Wow, who would have thought 20 years ago that we would have that today, like in our smartphones or cars? Who would have thought they didn't really know what a tablet computer was going to be? Notice how they said you would send a fax from the tablet, because they didn't even know what those protocols would be. They didn't know there would be email or instant messaging or text messaging, but they still knew there was something we would want to do, to connect with each other, which they thought was going to be a fax. Interesting enough. So again, that was a moment in those 90s when really advertising was trying to get us to think about the future, and they were trying to sell us on the future and what those things were going to be. So they were getting us to dream, and they were getting us to think about things in new ways. I think advertising has changed a lot in those next 20 years from 1992. So I'm going to show you what advertising looks like today, which has got way more complicated and way more based on technology. And even how we sell technology has also changed. Here's actually an ad that we did last year for one of the biggest technology companies in the world.
Nobody ever set their sights on second place. Who aspires to be almost remembered? There's a reason there are no giant foam figures that say, "We're number 3." No one wants to tell an average joke, make an underwhelming entrance, go out with a whimper. No one ever stood in front of the mirror with a hairbrush pretending to be the tambourine player. And there are definitely more kids dressed as Batman than Robin. We all aspire. So when we built the new Samsung Galaxy S2, we built it to be the best and brightest, with the most vivid screen out there, on our fastest phone ever. Because we're Samsung, and that's just the way we're wired. The Samsung Galaxy S2.
Okay. So that's what it looks like in television, but there's way more that we have to do nowadays. So in fact, whoops, can we just go back into the presentation? Thank you. Okay, so this is in fact now what things look like. We actually have to create these gigantic interaction schemes of how people will not just look at our advertising in television. You'll notice we have all of these new channels, and the way in which we ask people to participate and be a part of this advertising is now huge. So you see there we have awareness to aggregation and finally activities that people do in the real world. So it's become incredibly more complicated, but we like to try to simplify it. We've come up with these 3 words we use called play, buy and share. And they're 3 simple words that we believe marketing and advertising needs to be about today, but also in the future. How do we get people to participate with a brand and its purpose? How do we get them to share, and how do we get them to buy? And those things all working together. So what's it going to be like in 100 years? Do you think it's going to be more like the advertising that I showed you before, or more like the stuff in the future? Well, let's have a look at what that could be. So there's a couple of things we can learn about changes, and there's been some people way smarter than me that have studied technology change and the role that's played in people in the last 50 years. And here's a couple of things that we've learned. Whenever there's a new technology comes out, it brings great value, but it also brings great pain. My boys, my children, they all have tablets now, and forever there's immense value from all the apps and things they use on those tablets. But there's also immense pain in terms of how much time you need to update them and finding new ones and doing all the maintenance work. Look at email, look at the value that email gave us, but look at now all the amount of time that we do just managing our email. So for every one of these changes that comes out, there's things that happen, there's things we do, and there's things that get undone. There's winners and losers all around the world in terms of business. There's adding things to the world, and then there's changing things. And finally, and I think it's important for my children, is there's things that are invented, like we look at the tablets of today, and they do almost become mythical. They become something that wasn't an invention at the time, but actually some mythical gift from some god, and that's the way we start treating them. So how's marketing going to deal with these kind of changes today? How are we going to adapt that? I thought I'd bring a metaphor to you. So I'm going to bring a childhood dance to you guys called the Hokey Pokey. Does anyone in the room know what the Hokey Pokey is? Hopefully no one, because it's a childhood dance. We have one English or a Canadian gentleman down here. So my wife warned me never to sing in public because I'm really bad. She didn't tell me that I couldn't dance in public, so I'm going to dance for you today. The Hokey Pokey is this really, really simple childhood dance about putting your left foot in, putting your left foot back, putting your left foot in, shaking it all about, and then doing the Hokey Pokey and turning around. Now, you may be thinking, why on earth am I doing the Hokey Pokey up here? I believe marketing and advertising, we're at a point which is like the Hokey Pokey. Today we have so much data and so much information that we are literally putting our left foot in terms of some things, but we're actually taking more out. We're taking our foot way back out in other ways. All of the data and intelligence we're getting, it's making marketing more efficient. It's making it more targeted to you guys. It's not necessarily adding any value to it though. So my issue today with marketing is that by optimizing and using data and information, how are we adding to it versus just taking away? And I feel like that's one of our biggest pain points. So I believe it's all about the Hokey Pokey. Instead of taking our foot out, how can we put our feet in? So this is what it kind of looks like, although I just demonstrated it. So taking out and adding in, these are the things that I think are really important as we move forward 100 years. I believe marketing will move from taking it out to adding things back in. So what's that going to look like? Well, today I'm going to make some bold predictions. Right? There's going to be some industries that are going to be completely wiped out in the next 10 years, let alone 50 or 100. So let's take a look at what those things could be. So here's the things that I believe are going to get taken out as we move forward in terms of marketing and technology. So we look at people and brands. The first one's going to be war. I believe right now we still talk about marketing as about war, about targeting people and winning them over and converting them and conquesting and all that kind of stuff. That's going to change. We're going to stop from selling. All right, there's going to be too many brands, too many products, not enough time. We're going to stop selling. Okay? This idea of borrowing equity, borrowing from other partners and brands, that's going to go away. We're going to stop talking about advocacy. Every brand today is trying to use social media to create these advocates, these mythical advocates who will sell on behalf of your brand. We're going to go from good data to something else. And today we're fascinated by having the best data that we can make our marketing more efficient. We're going to shift from being about content. Brands today all want to be content providers. They want to be content creators. We're going to move from this area of privacy. Right now, one of the biggest barriers in marketing is privacy, and that's going to be shifted in the next 10 years. Lifetime value. We talk about customers as if they're ours for a life versus something we're trying to serve. We talk about e-commerce today. E-commerce is the big thing that most companies are trying to deal with. How do they sell more directly to people? How do they do that more efficiently? We're going to stop talking about winning people over. We're going to stop trying to be transparent, and we're actually going to have a purpose. Today, social media is making every company more transparent, but not necessarily more purpose-driven. We're going to stop talking about the physical. Brands are going to have to become much more than products that you buy. We're going to stop thinking about our advertising as being disposable. Right now, there's so much advertising out there that won't last more than a few weeks. We're going to stop thinking about things as being just creators. Right now, we're either brands as creators or people as creators. And we're going to stop thinking about how we get people to buy our products. You may be like, why aren't we going to get people to buy our products? And I'll explain in a minute. We're going to stop talking about one-to-one. Right now, everyone's talking about one-to-one relationships. And so what are we going to add back in? I've just said to you all the things we're going to take out, right, with my dance metaphor. What are we going to add back in? And here they are. So the things I believe will change in the next 5, 10, 15, 100 years is that we're going to talk about people as our ally. We're going to talk about how can we be their ally in life. How do we create an exchange between us and people that are going to buy our products and services? How do we create an ecosystem that actually connects around our business? Today, companies can no longer be standalone. They have to have an ecosystem of partnerships. And if you look at the latest brands that are getting into the top 100 most valuable brands, they're people like Google and Facebook. And they're doing that because they have built an ecosystem around them of partnerships. What's good for the partners is good for them. How many of the old-fashioned companies have that kind of an ecosystem? They have distributors and sellers, not necessarily like an ecosystem. We're going to truly build relationships, and we're going to do that based on knowing and truly really knowing what people want rather than trying to sell to them. We're going to look at data for good. And I said good data before, but now we're looking for data for good. How do we use the information? I'll give you an example. Coca-Cola has a fountain machine that drinks soda where the kids can actually go up and actually hit any button they want and mix and match from about 100 different flavors. Today, they're going to be using all the data they collect from that to possibly think about what products they should be selling. But imagine if the flavors that kids were choosing on the Coca-Cola soft drink machine, imagine if you gave that to the pharmaceutical companies and you said, here's the 5 flavors that all the kids are drinking as soft drink. Why, when you make medicines, have those flavors? There's ways of leveraging the data in much more ways than just leveraging your products, but truly using those ecosystems. Services. Brands must become services. Brands must move to becoming services. They can no longer be product. The fastest way to get your brand to being out there in the marketplace is to create a service. You have no distribution, no physical barriers. Most brands in 100 years' time will have some sort of service function as well as their core product. This idea of privacy will go away, and a new word that I heard the other day called privacy. Privacy is based on preferences and based on privacy. I care not whether you know that I like an aisle seat or a window seat when I travel on an aeroplane, but I do care deeply about my medical information and my other preferences. So the difference between preferences and privacy will change. You will be quite equally happily broadcasting some of your preferences, but you may not be happy with some of your more private information. So that's going to change. We're going to look at brands as lifetime partners with people. I'm going to invent a new term today called hommerce, which is basically that you're going to be starting to get your own products and services at home. 3D printers will be all in your homes, where instead of ordering a spare part and having it shipped to you, you will order it off the internet, your 3D printer will create that part, you will print it and then use it at home. E-commerce won't even be, and retail won't even be there anymore, it'll all be done at home. We're going to look at winning with people. We look at how to become more human, how to become much more experiential, how to become much more purposeful, how do we create editors, because today we're about content, but everyone's going to become an editor. Renting is going to be big. How do we look at renting? It's going to change over time. Instead of buying products, if there's services, then you will rent them. How do we look at peer-to-peer? And so, to me, this is what I call the new Hokey Pokey. This is where there's a new model of how brands are going to be adding back in based on more purposeful interactions than necessarily just taking out by being more efficient. So it's going to be 2 feet in rather than 1 foot out, 1 foot in, okay, if you know the Hokey Pokey. So to sum up, here's 3 things I believe. That technology, creativity, and innovation all have to work together. Technology is the means, creativity is the meaning, and innovation is the method. That's how you go and do it. So when someone says to you it's all about innovation, I believe it's way more than that. Innovation is only one means. You've got to have the true meaning and the true means to be able to do those things. It's only the method. And so finally, I believe that creativity can transform human behavior. This is what we believe as a company, and it's what I believe personally. And I believe that creativity is the most powerful part of that. It'll let us use technology, it'll let us use innovation to be much more purposeful. So hopefully I've given you a glimpse into the future, and hopefully I'm going to start a new craze or a new internet meme in Russia with the Hokey Pokey. Thank you.